When our country started, Thomas Jefferson was one of our great founding fathers. He wrote that in the questions of power, then no longer let it be said, or no longer let it be heard, of confidence in man, but bind him from his mischief by the chains of the Constitution. The Constitution was originally intended to bind government. They were very worried about big government. They were worried about the English government and how big things had become. Now, we were lucky in this country. We had a revolution, and we were able to have a civilization arise out of that. The French weren't so lucky. They had a revolution, and out of their revolution came the guillotine, chaos, dictatorship, Napoleon. But out of ours, we were able to achieve a stable country. One of the things that I think can't be overstated and why we were so lucky is that in 1776, we'd already had established government here for 150 years. We'd had the House of Burgesses in Virginia. Every colony had had a legislature. So we had had some history. So when we had our revolution, we had stability there, and we had governments that allowed us to go forward. We instituted the Constitution, and with the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. From the very beginning, though, there were attacks on the Bill of Rights. Within the 1792-1793 period, there was the Alien and Sedition Acts, where they put people in prison for basically stating their mind. In every generation, your rights will be challenged. The Constitution is there to protect you, but you have to understand the Constitution in order to defend yourselves from big government. This went on. You have many usurpations of power throughout our history. And at each time, government gets bigger and we have to fight back against it. During the Civil War, there was a great battle fought over slavery as well as other issues. But some of the things that got lost in the war as things went forward is that some of the rights were lost. For example, the right to freedom of press was taken away. The right of habeas corpus, not to have your body placed under arrest without some sort of indictment, was taken away during the Civil War. There were congressmen who were deported from their states for speaking out against the government and saying that they had to follow the Constitution more properly. You go along to World War I and you think, no way in America would you ever be put in jail for objecting. There was a minister in Vermont who spoke out against World War I. He was a pacifist, and he felt the Christian doctrine did not embrace war. He was given a 15-year sentence in jail. People say, no way, not in America. 15 years in prison. There was a perennial socialist candidate, Eugene Debs, who ran 15 times for president. He spoke out against World War I, and he was put in jail for 10 years. But he was popular enough that he ran for president from jail in 1920 and got over 1 million votes. Now, I didn't like his platform, but I think we do have to be wary of protecting our rights. We leap forward past World War I and we get to the time after 9/11. After 9/11, we were in a hurry. We were worried. We were afraid. So we passed a lot of legislation to say, get those people. Let's get them. But in the process, maybe we allowed the government to get other people that weren't guilty of things. We passed the Patriot Act that says you can have the ability of the government to search your house without a warrant. This is what James Otis wrote about in 1776. They called it writs of assistance. We were very worried about soldiers coming into our house without a warrant. A warrant, if you're accused of something, even something awful, if you're accused of murder, a judge has to sign a warrant. There has to be probable cause before they come into your house. Under the Patriot Act, they can come into your house without a warrant. It's called a national security letter. And people said, oh, well, that's fine. We're just going to go after foreigners. Well, that's the way it started out. They had to prove that you were connected to a foreign government. But it very quickly evolved into, oh, well, could be a domestic terrorist. Let's just say they can go in anyone's house without a warrant. Then they said, well, what if we'll get bad press if people are talking about going in their house without a warrant. They made it a felony and a 5-year penalty if you tell somebody they've come into your house under a warrant. They can subpoena your reading records at the library here in the college without a warrant, and if the librarian complains and says you shouldn't be doing that to individuals, she or he can be put in jail for 5 years for mentioning this secret warrant. We have to be vigilant of our liberty. We cannot give up our liberty in exchange for security. Benjamin Franklin said, "Those who give up their liberty in exchange for security will have neither." We need to remember this as a people and not get so fearful of foreigners or fearful of other countries that we give up the most cherished things that we're trying to defend in this country. There's the Constitution, if you look at it, has what are called enumerated powers. About 20 to 23, depending on how you read them. This is what we were intended to do at the federal level. But if you look at everything the government does now, probably 80% of it was not in the enumerated powers. And consequently, our government has grown so large that we have a $1.75 trillion deficit this year. The deficit this year will be 13% of the gross national product. Spending is at 28% of gross national product. These are at historic highs. We're spending money at $53,000 a second. Government is out of control. People say, well, I can't conceive of $1 trillion. If I had $1,000 bills stacked in my hand, 4 inches high, I'd have $1 million. If I wanted to have $1 trillion in my hand with $1,000 bills, it'd be 67 miles tall. That's the kind of deficit you're inheriting. And people routinely will say this, our kids and our grandkids will pay for this debt. And that's true. But I think the problem is more imminent than that. The problem will come sooner and quicker than actually paying for the debt, because the way government pays for it is by inflating the currency. You can tax people to pay for debt, or you can borrow. We've already borrowed a huge amount from foreigners. We owe the Chinese $800 billion, the Japanese $700 billion, the Saudis $100 billion, the Taiwanese $100 billion. We used to export things in this country, but you know what our number one export is now? The debt. We sell our debt to foreign countries. But they're becoming wary of buying our debt now too. How long will it go on that they will buy our debt? But if you can't tax people enough, if you run out of borrowing capacity, the third way you pay for debt is simply by printing money. The Federal Reserve, it's called monetization of the debt. The Federal Reserve buys treasury bonds or buys foreign bonds, or actually in the last year what they've been buying is bad home loans and used car loans. So it used to be that your dollar was backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. At one time it was gold. You could turn your dollar in for gold. For the last 30 years or so, it's been mostly treasury bills that back the dollar. But now it's backed by used car loans, bad foreign debt, and bad home debt, as well as treasury bonds. That's a worrisome time. And that's why you see this volatility, and you see the price of gold rising, and you see people worried. People say, oh, this is America. It could never go wrong in America. There's no way that we'll ever have a problem like that. If you read your history, in 1923 in Germany, the Weimar Republic, they destroyed their currency. They were a civilized nation, but they destroyed their currency. You'll see in your books pictures of money in wheelbarrows where they were going to the grocery store to buy a loaf of bread with a wheelbarrow full of money. The money became so worthless that by noon, workers demanded to be paid, because by 5 o'clock in the evening, the money was worth even less. So they demanded to be paid twice a day. At one point, the money becomes so worthless that it was of more value to burn the money than it was to spend it. There's a period of time through September through November of 1923 where you can see the money losing its value. It was 1 million marks for bread, then it was 10 million, then it was 100 million, then it was 1 billion, then it was 100 billion, and then the currency became worthless. When you print too much money, it loses its value. That's the way we're going to pay for our debt. You will pay for it through higher inflation and higher prices. Who gets hurt worst by higher prices and inflation? Those on fixed income and those who are in the lower socioeconomic class. Some of you may go right into the upper income class, but most of you will start out at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, because that's just the way it is when you get out of school. You're going to start out here and hopefully work your way up. So you will be the class of people that get killed by $8 a gallon milk or $5 a gallon gasoline. But instead of just getting mad at the man or getting mad at whoever, you have to understand why your prices will rise. Your prices will rise because your government is too big, spends money you don't have, runs up a debt, and they pay for the debt through creation of new money. The destruction of your money will cause unemployment